There's a particular kind of person who finds it harder to relax than most people. Not because their life is more stressful, but because their mind simply doesn't stop. They'll sit in a quiet room and somehow end up thinking about something that happened 7 years ago, turning it over, looking at it from a new angle, wondering what it actually meant. Other people move on. This person can't. Not because they're stuck, but because their brain is wired to keep going deeper. Most of them never call themselves deep thinkers. In fact, many of them quietly wonder if something is wrong with them. Why can't they just let things go? Why does everything feel so layered? Why does a simple conversation sometimes leave them exhausted for hours? The answer isn't a flaw, it's a cognitive pattern. And today, we're going to look at 10 of its most hidden signs, the ones that show up in everyday behavior, in emotional responses, in the way a person moves through the world, often without even realizing what it says about how their mind actually works. Sign 1. You're comfortable sitting with unanswered questions. Most people feel an almost physical discomfort when something doesn't have a clear answer. The brain naturally seeks closure. Psychologists call this the need for cognitive closure, and it's a strong drive in most humans. But deep thinkers tend to resist premature answers. They would rather hold a question open than accept a shallow explanation just to make the discomfort go away. Research in cognitive psychology suggests that people with higher tolerance for ambiguity are often the same people who think most carefully and creatively. So, if you find yourself living inside questions, genuinely curious rather than anxious about them, that's not indecision. That's a sign your brain is working at a deeper level. Sign 2. You notice patterns that other people overlook. Deep thinkers are, at their core, pattern detectors. Where someone else sees a one-time event, you see a recurring theme. Where someone else hears a casual comment, you hear an emotional pattern that's been building for months. This isn't overthinking, although it can feel that way. What's actually happening is that your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for analysis and long-term reasoning, is constantly working to connect new information to existing frameworks. This is one of the hallmarks of what psychologists describe as integrative thinking, the ability to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously and find the deeper structure underneath them. Sign 3. You often feel slightly out of step with surface-level conversations. Here's something interesting. Deep thinkers frequently report a mild sense of social friction, not because they dislike people, but because small talk genuinely feels empty to them. It's not arrogance, it's a neurological preference. Research on personality traits shows that individuals who score high in openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality dimensions, tend to crave conversations that go somewhere, that explore ideas, that peel back layers. Shallow exchanges don't trigger the same cognitive engagement. The brain essentially gets bored when it's only operating at the surface. So, if you've ever walked away from a party feeling strangely unfulfilled, despite being surrounded by people, this might be why. Sign 4. You have a strong inner monologue, and it rarely stops. Your mind is almost always processing. You replay conversations. You mentally rehearse scenarios before they happen. You find yourself in the middle of a mundane task, washing dishes, sitting in traffic, and realize you've been deep in thought for the last 10 minutes without noticing. Psychologists call this kind of internal processing self-referential thinking, and it's closely linked to the brain's default mode network, the neural system that activates when we're not focused on external tasks and turns inward instead. Deep thinkers tend to have a very active default mode network. The quiet moments other people use to simply rest are, for them, an invitation for the mind to begin exploring. Consider this for a moment. We're only 4 signs in, and already you might be noticing something. These patterns don't usually feel like strengths in everyday life. They often feel like complications. And that paradox is actually central to understanding the deep thinker's psychology. Stay with that thought as we continue. Sign 5. You feel emotions with unusual depth and precision. Deep thinkers don't just feel emotions, they tend to think about them at the same time. This is sometimes called emotional granularity, a concept studied extensively by psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett. Rather than simply feeling bad, a person with high emotional granularity might identify that they're feeling specifically disappointed or quietly resentful, or that strange mix of longing and nostalgia that doesn't quite have a common name. This precision isn't just sensitivity, it's evidence of a brain that is constantly analyzing experience, even emotional experience, searching for meaning and structure. Deep thinkers often feel things more fully because their minds won't let the experience stay simple. Sign 6. You frequently question your own thinking. One of the quiet paradoxes of deep thinking is this: the more carefully someone thinks, the more aware they become of how easily thinking can go wrong. Deep thinkers tend to engage in what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about their own thought processes. They catch themselves mid-assumption and wonder where that belief actually came from. They update their opinions when new evidence arrives, without experiencing it as a personal defeat. This self-questioning might occasionally look like self-doubt from the outside, but inside, it's actually a sign of intellectual honesty, an unwillingness to let convenient thinking replace careful thinking. Sign 7. You need time alone to recharge and to think clearly. Solitude isn't isolation for a deep thinker. It's a functional need. When your mind is processing at the depth we've been describing, tracking patterns, analyzing emotions, running internal conversations, questioning assumptions, the presence of other people adds a significant cognitive load. Social environments demand a portion of your attention all the time, even when nothing important is happening. For the deep thinker, solitude is when the real internal work can continue uninterrupted. Studies on introversion and cognitive processing suggest that people who prefer quieter environments for thinking tend to process sensory and social information more thoroughly, which is why external noise feels proportionally more draining to them. Sign 8. You're drawn to understanding the why behind almost everything. Surface explanations feel incomplete to you. When someone tells you what happened, your first instinct is to ask why it happened, and then why that reason exists, and what deeper dynamic is actually driving things. This is sometimes described in psychology as a need for cognition, a trait characterized by a genuine intrinsic motivation to think deeply and thoroughly, rather than settling for quick answers. People high in need for cognition tend to find intellectual engagement inherently rewarding. Their brains release dopamine, not just from social rewards or physical pleasure, but from the moment of insight, the feeling of pieces clicking together into meaning. Sign 9. You find it difficult to do things without understanding the deeper purpose. Deep thinkers often struggle with tasks that feel arbitrary or meaningless. It's not laziness. It's that the brain is oriented towards significance. When the why behind something is unclear or unconvincing, the motivation simply doesn't generate. This is sometimes misread as resistance or rigidity by people around them. But what's actually happening is that a person's identity and sense of meaning are closely woven into their actions. Doing something just because you're supposed to, without understanding the reasoning, feels like a kind of disconnection from yourself. Viktor Frankl wrote about the human need for meaning as one of our most fundamental psychological drives. And for deep thinkers, that drive shapes even everyday decisions. Sign 10. You often feel the weight of things others seem not to notice. Perhaps the most quietly difficult sign of all. Deep thinkers often carry a kind of background awareness of complexity, tension, and consequence that doesn't seem to register as strongly for people around them. They notice the undercurrent of sadness in a situation everyone else finds light. They sense when a relationship has shifted before anyone has said anything. They feel the weight of decisions that others make quickly. This heightened awareness isn't a disorder. It's actually a natural consequence of a mind that processes deeply and broadly, but it can be exhausting, and it can create a loneliness of perception, the sense that you're seeing something real that no one else is quite acknowledging. Here's what all of this points toward. Deep thinking isn't a personality type you choose. It's a cognitive and emotional orientation, a particular way the mind engages with experience that shapes nearly everything about how you move through the world. The patterns we've explored today don't make someone superior. They come with their own challenges, their own forms of exhaustion, their own social friction. But understanding these patterns, really recognizing them in yourself, changes something. Because when you understand why your mind works the way it does, the things that once felt like flaws start to look like something else entirely. Not weaknesses, just the particular shape of a mind that refuses to stop looking deeper. And that, in its own quiet way, matters.